Dates are there. It's almost here, which means we're back with some 49ers talk. I've got my guy Suneil. We're going to be talking to you about a couple of in-season predictions and training camp stuff right after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on three. 1, 2, 3. Dominate.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the program. We're here. Been a little bit of less recording the last 2 weeks, but I've got my guy Suneil. Best way to start the recording back. And, we talking some 49ers. How you doing, my man?
Yeah, man, it's been obviously this time of year is the hardest for content creators, right? It's pretty slow, not too much going on until training camp starts. But glad to be back on the stream with you, man. Everything's blessed. Happy belated 4th of July to everybody that's tuning in, and excited to talk shop with you, Ron.
Yeah, man. Like Suneil said, happy 4th of July to everybody out there. Hope everybody enjoyed a nice holiday on a Tuesday this week of all weeks, but hope everybody enjoyed the holiday, and ready to talk shop, and we'll get into it. A lot of the 49er stuff, we'll get the in-season predictions later in the show, but I want to start off, with training camp, with the news that's coming in at the moment. I'll say it that way. Obviously, the most recent kind of stuff has been tight end university, but something recently came out, quarterbacks related, about Sam Darnold. He's still working through learning the Shanahan offense. What is your quarterback outlook heading into training camp? How do you view it for the 49ers, and anything else that we should know?
I mean, I think for the first time in some time, Rohan, we have an actual pecking order for the 49ers, right? If healthy, QB1 we know is Brock Purdy, right? Now, the debates that, national media and social media and everybody has been really going in on is who's 2 and 3. And I think most people that are unbiased, I would say, have slotted in like Trey Lance is going to be the number 2 quarterback, right? He was earned the starting position last year. For him to just drop to now not even being the third string quarterback doesn't make sense. And it's not necessarily only, you can debate Sam Darnold versus Trey Lance and the upside of one, and knowing, what Sam Darnold brings to the table. But the biggest reason is that the quarterback position for the 49ers, that offensive playbook that Kyle Shanahan has, isn't something that's easy to learn. And it's not like just a plug and play type of offense where you can just come in and figure it out on the fly. It takes time to learn that. And so I don't think it's shocking. I think everybody that, like I said, was unbiased, knew that Sam Darnold was going to struggle. He talked about it in his first presser, I think, in OTAs, where he mentioned, I'm still trying to learn the playbook. And for it to go, this far in, and there's still being reports he's still, getting comfortable with it, I wouldn't say it's a negative for Sam Darnold. I'm just saying, like, that's just natural what's going to happen coming into a brand new system, new terminology, new playbook. Obviously, Kyle Shanahan is extremely advanced when it comes to offense. So it's very understandable that he's going through these growing pains and still, learning the playbook. But it also, I think, is a feather in the cap of Trey Lance, because remember when he was first drafted, one of the things that was coming up was how quick he learned the playbook, right? So for those that want to question the mentals or the aptitude of Trey Lance, like, we weren't hearing Trey Lance struggling with the playbook. He actually got it very, very quickly. So another, to me, sign that Trey Lance is going to be slotted in as QB2. And if there's any drawback between Brock Purdy's injury and he doesn't come back as healthy as it's looking or trending right now,
Right.
I would think that he'd be the starter as well.
Yeah, I think that what you said is fair, and I mean it's a good way to look at it. Right now, I mean the reality is one quarterback is learning the offense still, and we got a report about that recently. But one quarterback's still learning, going through the offense, and I think that that's important to note. it it's Darnold's first off season, right, with the 49ers. And it's not to say he's the only quarterback having challenges. Purdy, obviously, with his injury, we don't know the certainty about his we don't know the certainty of when his recovery timeline is. Lance, obviously, with the inconsistency that has been a portion of it, and really just a lack of experience. And Darnold, who has admitted it's been a work in progress. He continues to get better, but he's still got to study. He's got to go through the process of learning the system, and it's a Shanahan offense, one that, while it's quarterback friendly, you still have to have a good understanding of the offense to be able to execute it to the perfection that Shanahan wants. And so that's a portion that goes through it. About your quarterback pecking order, I found that interesting. Purdy, if he's healthy, starts. I think I like that logic. Whether or not people agree with it or not, I think that logic makes sense, understanding where the 49ers have been with their starting position and that they like Purdy. Are they jumping the gun? Who knows? But they like Purdy, and he's the guy who probably starts. Should he be able to return to practice and be ready to be built up coming into week one? Lance, on the other hand, has the upper hand on the playbook and things like that. We've heard national media talk about how Sam Darnold could shine in this offense. The question, though, is how soon? Because he is learning the offense. Lance's inconsistencies obviously could plague him from getting meaningful experience in games and things like that. But it's really the battle. How does Lance's inconsistencies play against Sam Darnold's understanding of the offense? Because this is going to be an old-fashioned quarterback battle. I'd expect, similar to minicamp, a split of the one first-team reps in between days. But they're running the same package. They're trying to perfect the package that obviously the 49ers used for Brock Purdy, it seems. And so, interested to see how this one plays out. I do agree that it seems right now there's a pecking order, but I don't know what that pecking order will be come the end of the offseason. But right now, as for now, seems Purdy, seems Darnold, seems, Purdy, Lance, then seems Darnold.
You know what's interesting that you just said? You said they're running the same packages, and those packages are built for Brock Purdy. What's interesting about that to me, Rohan, is I actually think that Trey Lance is going to look better in the plays that they're creating for Brock Purdy than the plays that were geared around Trey Lance. And what I mean by that is I think that with Brock Purdy, Shanahan is treating him like a quarterback, right? And I think one of the criticisms about the game calling when it came to Trey Lance was there was a lot of quarterback running, like power running plays that were there versus just keeping Trey Lance in as a quarterback and running plays like he would do if it was Jimmy, if it was, Mullins or whatnot, and then allow Trey's arm strength to be able to make those different decisions that maybe Jimmy Garoppolo wouldn't make because he doesn't have as much confidence in the strength of his arm. However, when Trey Lance got in there, it was a completely different game plan where, like I was saying, there's a lot of these power runs that were thrown in, a lot more utilizing his legs versus just letting him play the quarterback position. So I'm actually excited about seeing Trey Lance with the Brock Purdy quote unquote package because I think that that's what a lot of 49er fan base that still believes in Trey Lance and thinks that he could be a starter and a great starter for this team wants to see him given the opportunity to just play quarterback versus this hybrid that Shanahan has seemed to call for him. And obviously, I think that we would have seen that last year, but, the season got cut short for Trey because, unfortunately, in one of those running plays, or whether it was a scramble or was it a called run, I forget, but, ended up season-ending injury for him. But that's going to be one of the things that I'm excited to see is how Trey Lance looks in the quote-unquote Brock Purdy package.
There we go. But I agree in that I'm very interested to see how does Lance look in this Brock Purdy package. I don't think there's enough of a sample size to say how Lance would look, and there was a reason behind why the 49ers had the play calling they did last offseason, or last season, which is allowing Lance to develop through his strengths in order to get the package, the full player that they wanted come week 18. Given the inconsistencies that he showed with his accuracy and with the arm talent that he possessed, despite obviously having strong arm and different capabilities with that arm, and so
So
curious.
you believe that Shanahan called a different, like let's say a different package or a different way of calling the game for Trey Lance because he believed that Trey Lance wasn't ready to run, let's say, the Jimmy Garoppolo package? Or do you think it's because Kyle Shanahan saw the ability to have that quarterback that could throw and run and wanted to like utilize that? You think it's more because of where Trey Lance was at as a quarterback versus Kyle Shanahan wanting to bring another level to his offense?
I think it's a mix of both. More so the second version of what you're saying, that it brings an extra layer of the offense because that's the main reason, right? It brings the extra layer of the offense. But in regards to bringing the extra layer, it's not only about Lance, right? It's about the run game, and we could see the dividends that it paid that paid off when Lance was implemented into that level of offense. You saw the dividends that paid off. The run game was working spectacularly, and that was a huge facet of how the offense was working in that second game, albeit in not such a very small sample size. I don't think that it's because he didn't believe Lance was ready to run the Jimmy Garoppolo offense or anything or whatever you want to call it. It's more so that he felt the other version of offense would provide more given Lance's skill set and allow him to be more comfortable as he gained experience to where he was ready come week 18, come playoff time when the 49ers truly needed him to elevate their ceiling to win that national, or not national, but NFL championship.
Yeah, because I mean, the way that it sounded was you were stating that maybe it was more about Trey Lance not being ready versus them actually changing the
Uh,
offense because
yeah,
of the what Trey Lance is able to do that
it's
these
more
other
so the
quarterbacks
second
weren't
part.
able.
Yeah, it's more so the second part for sure. But yeah, quarterback outlook. We're curious to see how Lance performs really in an offense that'll purely be dictated, at least in training camp, by his arm talent, which has been the main, well, it's been one of the main strengths and one of the main concerns about Lance throughout the offseason and throughout really his short-lived NFL career.
I have a question for you, Rohan. Let's say Brock Purdy's healthy and he starts, and I think both of us, maybe I'm more strongly believe than you because I think you do think there might be a shorter leash. But let's say Brock Purdy plays and the team's winning in a similar fashion to how they were winning last season. Do you think that Trey Lance gets traded this season, like mid-season at the trade deadline? With because most likely there's going to be quarterbacks that get injured, so on and so forth. Or do you think that they keep Trey Lance throughout the season and possibly trade him in the off season if let's say Brock Purdy solidified as QB1?
I think that overall, well, Lance, so you're saying essentially, do you think that Lance would get traded should Purdy play well, or do you think they keep him? Is that kind of your question?
Yeah, like so let's just assume that Brock Purdy ends up being QB1 in like they believe that he's QB1. Do you believe that they trade Lance mid-season in the offseason, or do they just keep him as a backup throughout his rookie contract?
I think, first of all, if he doesn't get this starting job this year, he'll request a trade at some point, be it midseason or next offseason. But in regards to the 49ers, I don't think they'll be inclined to move him until they have to, just because his contract's fully guaranteed. And so if they believe in him at least as a backup, you've got your backup. Until his rookie contract's over with. And so I don't think they'll be inclined to move him, understanding they probably can't recoup much at all. Assets wise, they probably can't recoup much at him. Do I think he finishes his contract as in a 49ers uniform? His rookie contract, that is? No. I think they'd probably be inclined to move him in the offseason. I don't know as much in the regular season, especially if he cements himself as QB2. So that's the thing to me. I think that they'll be more comfortable with him and his understanding of the offense if he ends up cementing himself as QB2 and not want to lose that certainty of having a guy you trust in your quarterback number 2 for the season, and more so move him in the offseason.
So you think that Trey Lance's trade value is just too low to trade?
Yeah, to warrant the 49ers moving him over keeping him for the value of having a strong backup quarterback they believe in. I think so. Obviously, Sam Darnold's a part of the equation, and they have him as well. But I don't think that I think the best time to move him is when quarterback situations are unknown, when there isn't set in stone starters. Barring, obviously, if there's a significant injury and a team is willing to trade for Trey Lance, now that's a different question. But I also don't. I also question what team is willing to trade for Trey Lance.
Miami.
Miami's got backups though. They got Mike
Yeah,
White.
but
They got Mike White behind Tua.
all right. But if Tua goes down, like
I think they'd
let's
start Mike White over Trey Lance.
I think
Trading
that
for
they'd
Trey
be
Lance.
open
Yeah.
to. I think they'd be open to getting Trey Lance in, especially because obviously I think you know the coach over there has a familiarity with Trey. He was part of the staff when they drafted him, right? Or
Yeah,
did
he
he?
was there
Yeah.
for his rookie year.
So
Rookie year.
if Tua, let's say Tua has another season-ending injury or his concussion thing comes back, they got to be out on him, right? They have to be looking towards, hey, this probably isn't the solution for us, and based off of their draft, like they've traded away a lot of their draft capital
Right.
to build their roster. To me, I would think that especially if you're in the camp that you could get Trey Lance for not as much draft capital, I would say Miami would be a win-win for both sides because I don't think they think Mike White is going to be the solution, and I wonder how they're going to be able to like level up their quarterback situation without first-round picks, which I don't know exactly Miami's draft situation, but I would assume with all of the talent that they brought in using draft capital that they probably don't have their first rounds.
I think they have their first rounder after they lost theirs this year. I think they have theirs next year, but you'd still expect it to be in the mid to late first round for sure.
Yeah, so that would be an interesting one to me. I think Miami would definitely be a place I could see Trey Lance going if the Tua thing they have to get off of Tua because he can't stay healthy.
I would probably, in my opinion, I don't think that they look for Trey Lance if, in the case that Tua gets injured this season. I do think that they roll with Mike White. They have confidence in rolling with Mike White. Just he'd be with them for the entire offseason. He'd have that familiarity there. I'm not saying I think Mike White's necessarily better than Trey Lance, but I think that they'd roll with him given how they've essentially implemented him into the offense over the entire offseason. He's the guy with the familiarity with this specific skills group of players. So Miami, I think that if they don't think Tua is their guy, they draft somebody because there is quarterback talent available in this next draft at the mid to late end of the first round, where the Miami Dolphins would be primed to select. I think there are guys that they could view as potential talents there, or they look to maybe make a splash in free agency like Kirk Cousins. But I want to bring up Harold's point here about the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, that's a legitimate situation that I could see because they didn't draft a quarterback. They're a team that wants to compete. And if Jimmy Garoppolo gets injured, this is a team that I believe that they feel they can compete a little bit. And it would be absolutely ironic But the only issue with me with the Raiders is I don't think he fits the offensive style for Josh McDaniels as much. And that's the question that I have. I don't know if Josh McDaniels views Trey Lance as his top quarterback choice should they want to trade for somebody. But I think that, I think you can consider Las Vegas, given that they don't have anybody truly behind them after losing Mariota this offseason. The only question is the fit. Minnesota, though, Minnesota would be interesting, given I believe they cut Kellen Mond. So he'd be interesting in Minnesota, especially if they have an understanding that Kirk Cousins is going to leave them this offseason. The
But I
thing, though,
think that
yeah, go ahead.
Minnesota would probably be a off-season trade, right?
Oh, I'm
Mid-season.
assuming injury. I'm assuming injury to quarterback.
Okay, well, if
Where
Kirk Cousins,
if it's not injury, I would say that any Trey Lance trade would be an offseason trade. That's the
yeah,
way that I view
well,
it.
that's what I'm saying. So out of, let's say, God forbid, knock on wood, because we don't want to wish this.
Yeah,
Let's
of
say
course.
Jimmy, Kirk Cousins, and Tua all get injured. Same week,
Oh
they all
man.
go down, season-ending injuries to all three quarterbacks. So all three of these teams are either going to roll with their backups or, try to figure out that through a trade. You think that Minnesota and the Raiders is more likely than Miami?
I think Minnesota would be the most likely, just in the way that I view their divisions. Both of those teams, in my opinion, don't have very solid backups that they trust, and I think that both of those teams would be in a position where they want to compete. McDaniels for his job security, and Minnesota because of the weaker division. And I mean, first they were pretty solid last year. The chance they could continue to win and the fit of the offense. So I would say Minnesota is my number one team of those three teams based on team fit, based on backup, based on team standard in terms of competing.
Yeah, I would disagree. I think it's Miami because I think Miami, Trey Lance knows that offense.
Mm-hmm.
He's just going to come in and be able to know pretty much how to run that offense from day one because
Yeah.
it's the exact offense that San Francisco runs, right? Because they have the offense. He came from the offensive mindset of Shanahan. They're running the same thing. And when you talk about familiarity with players, I would push back that maybe Trey Lance is more familiar with, you look at the running backs, those are all 49er guys. Some of the receivers are 49er guys. The coach is a 49er guy. So, Mike White obviously has the whole offseason and all that kind of stuff on Trey Lance, but I don't think there would be that much. I don't think it would be that worrisome if they believe Trey Lance is a better option, not only for the now, but in the future, which I
Yeah.
would assume they think that Trey Lance, if they had a chance to get Trey Lance over Mike White, I think they would have picked Trey Lance. Um, to me, I think that would make the most sense for all parties. I think it would be great for Trey Lance because he would be put into a winning situation right from the jump, and I think it would be a win-win for Mike McDaniels, who would get a quarterback that I think he believes in and would understand and kind of fit what they're looking for um, from a quarterback in their offense.
No, that's definitely fair. I do want to point out one thing. I know Harold's bringing up arguments for Houston and Washington. I don't think a team with a losing record would make a midseason trade for a quarterback. That's the way that I look at it. I think they'd more rather have a full chance to evaluate their options in the offseason where they have an understanding of where they're selecting, what the buzz is around who selects around them before evaluating their quarterback situation rather than throwing away assets for a lost season, understanding that you might go in a different direction the next season. So that's the reasoning behind Houston. Well, Houston with CJ Stroud, they have their options. So I don't think that they'd trade for a guy even if Stroud gets injured. I think they'd roll with whoever they end up having as the backup and then looking forward to continuing Stroud the next year. Washington, I don't expect them to be good, and I expect them to go through the season with their current quarterback situation. If it doesn't work out, doesn't work out, and they draft high and they take one of the top two quarterbacks in the draft. But if not, I don't envision a midseason trade. I think that they'd roll with who they currently have.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that especially with Eric Bieniemy there now as the offensive coordinator in Washington, he would probably want to get his guy if they end up if they end up being out on
Right.
Sam Howell for whatever reason. And there's no real connection between Trey Lance and that organization, right? Houston, you would think because of obviously D'Amico being there. However, from all reports, CJ Stroud they're extremely high on.
Yeah.
So I don't, and they just traded a lot of draft capital to go up and get the 2 and the 3 pick, right? Well, they were already at the 2, but to get that 3rd pick. So yeah, I think that would send mixed messages to CJ Stroud to go in and get a guy like Trey Lance to compete. Um, doesn't make sense to me why Houston would do that.
Yeah, I agree. Want to give a quick shout out to Jesse Naylor, Last Second Sports. Have
I
not
thought
missed
that
you.
guy's not in the country right now. All right,
Have not
Jesse.
missed you one bit on Twitter. Wanted to point that out because you won't even see anything I post on Twitter. So have not missed you one bit. But no, Jesse, obviously one of the best guys in the business. Thank you for tuning in. Let's look forward though to training camp itself. We talked about position groups, position battles, and things like that. Let's specify it though, and we won't talk specifically about position battles, but players. 49ers had an interesting draft class last year. Who do you think steps up in that 2022 draft class? That second, the second years, we'll call them that. Who do you think steps up in that group?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a precedence, right? We've seen the second year players really, make a big impact. Namely, you know, namely Talanoa
Talanoa
Hufanga,
Hufanga? Yeah.
who ended up being, an All Pro in his second year. We also saw Aaron Banks take that huge leap and really solidify, that left guard position, playing, really really well at that position. So those two are really standouts. And for me, I think there's a lot of good options. I think that most people would want it to be Drake Jackson to be that guy that really steps up. But for me, I'm going to put my money on Sam Jackson or Samuel Womack. I'm sorry, Sam Jackson, Samuel Womack. And the reason why I say that is because I think that he's going to get the opportunity because we just know that the cornerback position, it's hard to keep guys healthy there. And
Yeah.
it's a super impactful position. And we've seen flashes of Samuel Womack. And I just think it's kind of like all the stars are aligning, right? The new defensive coordinator that comes in specializes in secondary. Samuel Womack is, on the fringe, right? Because they're drafting new corners all the time. Diamondre Lenore has really stepped up to solidify himself as CB2. So I think, they got, Isaiah coming in, looking to really solidify himself as the slot or the nickel corner. So I think there's going to be a lot of competition there in that secondary. And I could see that kind of, rising tides lifts all boats. I could see that, really invigorating a guy like Samuel Womack to elevate his game because now there's guys, behind him that are looking to get his spot as that CB3, possibly outside cornerback 3. And then he has to kind of compete with a guy like Diamondre Lenore to really maybe even see the field outside of, injury. So I would bet that concoction of the new coaching staff, the new coach being a specialist in the secondary, the depth that the corner or the competition that cornerback room is going to have all leads to a guy like Samuel Womack really being able to take that leap.
Yeah, and I mean, you talked about a couple of guys there. Samuel Womack's one of them. I'll go a different direction. I mean, you brought up Drake Jackson, and if we just take a look down to the look at the rundown of the class, Drake Jackson, the headliner, 61st overall pick in the second round. He's the guy who many people peg as, the up and coming guy because he's got a projected starting spot this season opposite of Nick Bosa, a place where you're generally facing one-on-one situations and have a chance to accumulate a good amount of stats there if the production can match the talent that is there with Drake Jackson. And so Drake Jackson's the guy who you'd expect to step up the season. I think this will be a make or break offseason for him in terms of how big his role will be in 2023. 49ers could bring in another guy, but if they're confident enough, you've got your guy in Drake Jackson. And so I think that that works overall. Third round picks, you got Danny Gray, you got Tyrion Davis Price. Those two, starting with Davis Price, I would expect similar output from 2022 unless Elijah Mitchell gets traded, which could be a possibility. Mitchell obviously has faced some injuries, but when he's on the field, he's very good. And so when you talk about Elijah Mitchell, if he's there, you've got your 2-3 punch behind Christian McCaffrey with Jordan Mason, another guy on the list, and Elijah Mitchell, leaving TDP as that fourth running back for the 49ers. So he'll likely be an inactive for most games if that's the case. And so, don't expect too much from him this season. After that, you've got Danny Gray. I've said before, I peg Danny Gray more as a 2025 guy than a 2024 guy. I think that he'll see an increase in role after 2 seasons in this offense with Jawan Jennings and Ray McLeod scheduled to depart after this offseason in terms of going into unrestricted free agency. 49ers might let them walk and bring in Danny Gray into the fold, allow him to earn some snaps in the slot, maybe even on the outside, and work his way through earning what his draft status indicates. But I don't think that he'll see as big of a role in 2024 or sorry 2023. I think it's more so he'll be a special teamer, and that speed can be used as a gunner. I like your pick about Samuel Womack. Another guy we mentioned is Spencer Burford, a guy who, second year and a first full year as a full time starter. I think Spencer Burford's got a good chance of stepping up. I think I liked him coming out of college. I think he'll project well, and I think he'll have a solid year. Womack, we'll see. I think he's more of a special teamer again. I think he's similar boat in that I think he's 2025 or well 2024 25 is his year because I think Oliver has a good year in the slot. He's the guy who starts in the slot. Womack is a key special teamer, but with the 49ers and their cornerbacks, you never know how it'll go, right? In terms of the depth and the injuries that could potentially persist. And so he might be called up in spot duty in some difficult situations like he was at times last year. Hopefully he's more prepared, but he's going to get some opportunity likely at corner at some point in the season and also will be a key special teamer. The guy, though, who I'm most ready to see hopefully steps up. Well, he'll step up from what he had in 2022. Is Kalia Davis. I think Kalia Davis is going to have a solid season. He's a guy who should slide into that rotation, should make the 53-man roster, and hopefully get some playing time. A solid run defender, that's likely where he'll be used, even though he's a little undersized, explosive. That works out. And I think he's the guy who I'm really looking forward to in 2022. Obviously, Brock Purdy as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Brock Purdy probably will take the cake if he starts, right? Because the success of this team is going to be locked into what Brock Purdy did. So I'm keeping him out. But the two guys that you listed that would be next on my list outside. So without Brock Purdy's number one. But Spencer Burford, you mentioned, I think him being able to be that right guard without looking over his shoulder now and having to do that rotation with Daniel Brunskill, you can see him really taking that leap and solidifying himself as that right guard and kind of locking that down for the next, 5 to 10 years type of situation. But I think you downplayed it. Even if Elijah Mitchell is on the roster, JP Mason is the one that's been making kind of, the noise in this offseason, although, obviously OTAs and, with no pads and all that kind of stuff, not much, but the same type of noise that Elijah Mitchell was making, even though, Trey Sermon was drafted higher, there was guys like Jack and, other people that were there watching and saying, yo, look out for Elijah Mitchell. He might be the guy that actually takes over the baton and ended up doing so in his rookie year. You're hearing that same type of talk with JP Mason. So I'd be interested. I think that he could be a guy that plays a major role for this team, and possibly even earning outright, that RB2 role behind Christian McCaffrey, or being part of that three-headed monster where obviously Christian McCaffrey gets the bulk of the load, but Elijah Mitchell and JP Mason probably getting even amount of reps behind him based off of who's performing better on a game-to-game basis, which is what we saw Kyle Shanahan do in 2019 when he had, Tevin Coleman as the guy who got majority of the carries, and then,
Right.
based off of who had the hot hand, either Matt Breida or Raheem Mostert would get, the next amount of reps. I could see JP Mason kind of jumping in there and because they can't trust Elijah Mitchell to stay healthy for the whole season, giving him more reps to possibly rest Elijah Mitchell, or in the event that Elijah Mitchell goes down, really taking that baton as RB2.
I think, yeah. I mean, this is a very key one. I have confidence in Jordan Mason, and I think his durability and his increased receiving talent will put him in contention to get that RB2 spot. And I think the way that he runs, he provides something different, and he's the bruising back, that closer type of back that can help complement Christian McCaffrey, who's more so elusive and shifty between the tackles. So you got a couple of different guys. I think the 49ers still have value in Mitchell this season because he still is a little bit different. He has, breakaway speed to top the physicality that he provides, even if his injuries do harm him a little bit. But Jordan Mason, I think he's a guy who definitely is a guy who's going to stand out, and hopefully that leads to an increased role in 2023, more confidence in him. Wonder how his pass protection is going to be. Wonder how he'll be utilized in a receiver role. But I think that with the running back spot, 49ers are looking to replicate somebody in that Christian McCaffrey in that role, in that the 49ers want to get a player who can be utilized in that McCaffrey package to where they don't essentially have any tells offensively. They can utilize that same package with a different player and see the same outcome, especially when it's not as expected as it is with McCaffrey in the fold as a receiver.
Yeah, I mean, just going through the list we just went through right now, another, hats off to the scouting team and, whoever runs the draft, whether it be John Lynch or Adam Peters, like the amount of talent that they have, young talent still on this team that, you're talking about. Some of these players aren't even going to be utilized to their fullest potential for another year, right? So it's just amazing how well the 49ers draft to constantly be able to replenish, thinking like a year or two down the line versus just who's going to impact the team right away. Really good situation to be in, if you're the 49ers, to constantly have the replenish guys on the bench learning without the pressure of having to perform right away.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Now, Suneil, we talked about some of the training camp stuff, talked about some of the quarterback stuff. Want to get to some season predictions. And we see the headline of the video. Shout out to my guy, Al Sacco, runs the No Huddle podcast on 49ers Web Zone. Talked about Brock Purdy and potentially being a Pro Bowl quarterback, in 2023. Entertain me on the idea. What do you think about the topic?
So the topic is if Brock Purdy can be a Pro Bowler, right?
Yep.
So
obviously with the intention that he's healthy.
Yeah. So, obviously that's going to be a huge role. So to make the Pro Bowl, you have to be top 3 in the conference.
Correct.
So for me, and we're not talking alternate, right? Because alternate kind of throws a wrench in it, but we're saying top 3. Obviously with alternates, he could be that 4th or 5th, depending on, who wants to play and who makes the Super Bowl, all that kind of stuff. But I'm slotting in Jalen Hurts, guaranteed Pro Bowl spot. I think he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league. I think he's by far the number 1 quarterback in the NFC at this point. Then you got Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, Geno, Matt Stafford, and Justin Fields, to me, are the next, 2 out of those group, I think are going to be, the next 2 after Jalen Hurts. So do I think Brock Purdy is going to be able to put up better numbers than a Dak Prescott, than a Kirk Cousins, than a Justin Fields? I think those are kind of like the 3 that I'm choosing from. And okay. I would probably say No. And the reason why I say no is because those other three. So I think Justin Fields is going to have a breakout season this year. I think he finally has weapons. He's in his third year, has started the first 2 years, and we've seen him get better and better. Dual threat quarterback. I think those guys just end up having the stats to be able to be a Pro Bowl player, right? Um, and that the division he's in, there's opportunity to take a leap forward because I don't think there's anybody really in that division that's like has a stronghold over with Aaron Rodgers going, Dalvin Cook leaving. I think that gives a lot of opportunity to all the teams there. Um, so I think my bet would be just Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, and locks actually. So then it's really Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins, Brock Purdy. The reason why I don't think Brock Purdy's going to make it, not because I don't think Brock Purdy's going to have a great year. I just think the offense he's in, it's just not a prolific passing offense. And he doesn't have the rushing numbers to be able to make up like a Justin Fields might be able to have because he might not have the passing numbers to make up for it. You look at Kirk Cousins and that offense, especially with Dalvin Cook gone, you expect them, they could just brought in Addison along with already having Jefferson there. I think they're going to air the ball out. Kirk Cousins is going to have, possibly close to a 4,000-yard season, if not more. And then
Right.
Dak Prescott bringing in Brandon Cooks, they just let go of, Ezekiel Elliott. So they're going to be, more of a passing offense as well, I would say, especially with, now the coach over there is going to end up taking over, calling duties now that Kellen Moore is with the Chargers. So to me, I just think it's going to be more about opportunity versus who I think is going to be the better quarterback. I think Brock Purdy is going to win more than most quarterbacks in the NFC, if not all the quarterbacks in the NFC. I just don't think in the offense he's in, which is a run-first offense with a guy like Christian McCaffrey, he's going to have the ability to put up the passing numbers that are needed to really solidify himself in a Pro Bowl conversation.
I like the argument, and it's an interesting topic. I just wanted to crack down some of the numbers, right? When you look at Purdy, I'm taking purely all like what is it, 6 of his games in the regular season that he played significantly, 5 starts, and then the Miami game where he got subbed in the end of the first quarter. You average it out, he averaged 218 yards per game, put it over a 17 game period. That's 3,706 yards. Accuracy at 68%, touchdown interception ratio of 37 to 8, obviously over a 17 game season this is. And so, like, they're solid numbers, 3,700 yards, 37 to 8 touchdown interception ratio. The only thing is, you're right. There is good competition, and the NFC is weaker for sure than the AFC, right? Like the quarterbacks that made it last year were Geno Smith, Kirk Cousins, and Jared Goff. Hurts obviously was selected, did not make it though because he was in the Super Bowl. And so you've got a couple of options there. And when you look at Purdy compared to the rest of the bunch, Smith was solid last year. You could expect him to have a similar performance under a team that got better, in my opinion,
Yeah,
offensively. Added another weapon in Jackson Smith and
two
Jigba.
weapons.
Yeah,
They got Zach Charbonnet too,
yeah,
like
in the
who's a
running
great
in the
out
running
of
game,
the backfield as far as the passing option too. And Kenneth Walker should be healthy as well. Like
exactly.
Seattle has a squad. They're
No, and
nipping
they
right
do.
at the heels for the 49ers for sure.
And the one thing about Seattle, like the 49ers of a few years ago, they're young. All their
Mm-hmm.
players should develop, right? You're expecting Abraham Lucas, Charles Cross to develop at the tackle positions, and you're expecting guys like Kenneth Walker to develop, and alongside, the rookies they drafted to develop. So they've got good options there. Gino could have a good year there. Dak Prescott was not named last year, I believe, because he missed the first portion of the season. That was an injury. He's normally a Pro Bowl quarterback, at least in a weaker NFC. He's an option that you've got to consider now. Hurts is an option you always have to consider. Justin Fields, you talked about him. He could break out. And I think all the options from last year. Goff has a chance to repeat what he did last year. It's a strong offensive line unit there, a solid running back group, and some solid wideouts too. That now adds Jamison Williams to the mix. Well, after 6 games, that is, but still
Yeah,
adds Williams to the mix. I think it's a strong group there as
and
well. To
Stafford's
where
back.
Stafford's back as well. Yeah, he struggled through injuries all of last season. So a good amount of what do you call it? A good amount of competition. But to say this about Purdy, strong finish to the year last year when he was starting. And I think that I don't know if he can eclipse 4,000 yards in this specific system just because of his arm limitations. But if he's fully healthy for the 17 game season, I think that he'll have a pretty solid season this year.
Yeah, and I agree with that. The numbers you mentioned, I think would make it in a different era. But in this era, I
Right.
don't think unless you're putting up, if you have those type of numbers, 37,000, 37 and 8, which is amazing, right? You also have to have 500, 600 yards rushing with another, 8 touchdowns, right? Because the quarterbacks that are just throwing the ball are, Dak's going to be over 4,000 yards. Kirk Cousins probably going to be over 4,000 yards. Possibly, Stafford, Goff could all be over 4,000 yards. So you're looking at, all right, how are you separating yourself? But the goal, Brock Purdy can't play in the Pro Bowl game anyways because he's in the Super Bowl, right? So this could all be moot at the end of the day.
Yeah. Love Harold's comment here. Keep this one. Suneil snubs Brock Purdy. Recording for the end of the season. We'll keep this because I'm on Suneil's train right now. But hey, man, it's been a hell of a show, a fun show. We talked about a lot. Want to give a shout out to 187 here for tuning in. Bang Bang Niner Gang, as you say it. But all the guys in the comments, thank you guys for tuning in. Any last thoughts, Sunil, before we head on out with this fun discussion here on quarterbacks?
Nah, man. Like we said in the beginning of the show, it is a rough patch for content creators that constantly keep having things to talk about. But appreciate you guys locking in and supporting us through the down times, and it's gonna only pick up from here.
100%. You guys, you got 20 days, and then it's a real pickup from there. So y'all be sure to stay tuned to both of our channels. Hit the links in the description to make sure you're subscribed. And for those of you guys that tune in, both on audio and on video, thank you guys so much. We appreciate it, and we'll see you guys next time.